I am Shannon Smith, married to that guy. I also am the Mo Group Director here at Momentum Church, and I am facilitating this panel of wonderful people, past elders and current elder here at Momentum. What is an elder? What is an elder? An elder is not necessarily someone who is old in age when it comes to the church, but it is somebody, it's the team of men here at Momentum that lead the church. They put Titus, let me see, this is Titus 1:5. They kind of put the church in order. As churches were multiplied in the New Testament, Paul would go and he would start new churches all over, but he would leave people behind to set up elders in that church. And he would do that in order for the church to kind of be led, and then he would go on and start new churches. In 1 Timothy 5:17, an elder they direct the affairs of the church. So that's what these guys do. Let them introduce themselves. Dana, you want to start?
So my name is Dana Wooters, and I had the distinct privilege and honor of being one of the first elders here at Momentum. I believe that was back in 2016. My family lived here from 2010 to 2017. My job took me down to Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is where I currently live.
I'm Mike Love. I was an elder here from October 2017 until this past October. We have in our bylaws that you take a break. So right now we're on a break, me and the elder team, and we're not sure if it's either 1, 2 years, or maybe 12.
Okay, so
we're not sure. Dan put in the notes. So
Dan typed out some notes,
snuck that
and
in.
I'm reading, and he was like, and Mike is on a break for 12 years, and I was like, wow, 12 years. So Mike this morning says, Shannon, was that supposed to be 1 to 2 years? And I was like, makes more sense. Makes more sense.
See you in 12 years, Momentum.
See you in 12 years.
I'm Jason. Out of this group, I'm the only current elder here. The other 2 elders, Dan and Jeremy, are in Alaska, and they decided to do that instead of speak up here this week. I didn't even know that was an option. Otherwise, I'd be in Alaska.
So again, these guys from the past, they have led Jason, Jeremy, and Dan. Dan is also an elder. Paradoxically, the elders are also his boss. And so we also have Russ Goodwin is an apprentice elder here. But they set an example for us. They protect us from false teaching, from harmful people, and they are servant leaders. All of them past have served and currently do serve. In the past couple weeks, we've been in a series called Give It Up for God, and talking about generosity. So we want to be kind and rewind just a little bit and go through a few words that maybe you don't use in your typical vocabulary. And the first one is stewardship. So you'll hear a lot about stewardship in the Bible. Dana, I'll ask you this question. In your own words, what does stewardship mean from a Christian perspective?
So the idea of a steward, like you said, not a word we use a lot. Is the idea of a servant who manages his master's property. And as believers, God's property is us. We belong to him. So, we manage ourselves in a manner that pleases the master. And of course, if we're talking about that in terms of money, it would be managing the money that we have that really belongs to God and doing it in a manner that pleases him.
And then there's this other word, tithing. Probably don't use that in your everyday life. But tithing is a type of percentage giving. Mike, would you explain what that is?
Yeah, so I love math. Who doesn't? So I
love math, Mike.
I know. I appreciate that about you, Shannon. So with that, percentage giving is the idea of all right, you're gonna have your paycheck that you take, and you're gonna say this percentage each paycheck. This is what I'm gonna give back to God. I'm gonna give to the church. Tithing, more specifically, is the idea of starting with that 10% and saying that I'm gonna tithe. I'm gonna give 10% of each paycheck, and I'm gonna give that to the church. Give that back to God.
Then our last word we'll cover is first fruits. Does not necessarily mean the first apple you eat, but first fruits. Jason, you want to describe what that is?
So first fruits, that's a kind of an agricultural term where you're bringing in the harvest. And as you bring in the harvest, the first fruits or the first portion of it, you give back to the temple, you give back to God. Nowadays, what it is when we bring in our income, the first part of that we give back to God.
So I've known these guys for a long time. I know that they work really hard. They have very demanding jobs, all 3 of them. Dana is a mechanical engineer. Jason's a nurse practitioner. Mike is a principal of a middle school, isn't it? Come on now. That's all of them, long hours, managing other people, and they're very generous people. So when you work really tough, you spent years getting to where you are, and you work really hard for what you get. Has there ever been a time, and I'll ask all three of you to answer this question, where you've been resistant to giving, and if so, how did you change your mindset?
Yeah, for sure. For me, when I became a teacher, I was still living at home. And not only was I living at home, my parents took care of everything for me. I remember at the time, I think I was probably the only first, second year teacher that my dad was still packing my lunch for me. So because of that, I didn't have to really worry much about finances. I always knew, and I just kind of put things away, and I just knew that I was okay because I just wasn't spending really any money. So then. And also too with that, I had a lot of anxiety, and I wanted to save that money because I always felt like, and still to this day, any time around that corner I could be fired, or let go, or different things like that. So always thinking like, all right, I gotta save this, and not really thinking much about it. Then when I got married to Lauren, who I'm not sure what she saw in me as a 26-year-old, not knowing how money works, and as I got married, we decided we wanted to start giving. We wanted to start giving to the church, and I've noticed through that opportunity, while I still have the anxiety about losing my job or not knowing what's around the corner, I have realized, like, all right, I don't know how, but I do know that God's going to help us somehow, and that if that happens, I'm going to be okay. That as I'm generous, and it's been awesome to see that growth. It's been awesome to experience that, and just knowing that I feel like God's got it under control.
For me, basically, there was one Sunday that I remember, ironically, it was an elder speaking at a church that I was attending at the time. He was speaking about tithing. And the passage that they brought up was something called Malachi 3:6, or 3:8, basically says, why are you robbing me? God's asking us, why are you robbing me? And our response is, how are we robbing you, God? And God's response back, in tithes and offering. And that Sunday, I remember it kind of haunted me. I'm like, am I robbing God? And so I grabbed whatever was in my pocket. I put in the offering plate. It was probably like $1. And I felt good, right? And that's kind of how I did it every single week from there. I was like, all right, whatever was left over in my pocket, I would just take out of my pocket. I'd put in the offering plate. I'd feel good about it. And there was one Sunday, I reached in my pocket, and I had that sinking feeling. Oh, no. And I pulled out a $20 bill. And $20 was a lot of money to me back then. And I'm like, what do I do? And in a moment of panic, I put it in the offering plate. And all these thoughts were going through my mind. I'm like, well, how do I get change? And I couldn't get it back because the plate was already passing down the aisle.
Anybody grow up where you had the offering plates that passed? You know what? Anybody that grew up in church, it was like silver, gold little plate with the felt at the bottom. Now I'm picturing Jason like making change in there. Sorry, just needed to put that away.
And so as it was passing down, all these thoughts were going through my mind is like, why? I didn't want to give the $20. I was okay giving like $1 or $2 a week and whatever was left over in my pocket, but giving that $20 bill hurt all of a sudden. And I wrestled with myself. I was like, why does God need my money? God doesn't need my money. God can make money. I mean, there's Bible stories where God pulled money out of a fish to pay taxes. I'm like, well, God doesn't need my money. And so ultimately it came down to saying, God's not after my money. God's after my heart. And he's saying, do you want me more than this? And you look at the dollar bill, it says, in God we trust on it. And it's like, do I really want God more than this? Do I believe God is who he says he is? And to me, ultimately, I say, yeah, I want God more than all the money in the whole world. And so God says, trust me. And so.
Well, first I was going to comment on Mike's dad packing his lunch for him, but my wife packs my lunch for me today. So I'll be the first to admit that, even today, making a decision to be, am I going to be selfish or am I going to be generous? That's still a challenge. That's a decision you have to make every time. That's still, I wouldn't say otherwise. But I guess for me, a little bit like Mike, I grew up, I became a believer when I was in high school. Everything was taken care of by my parents. I did work summer jobs, things like that, so I had a little money, but I really didn't think of that as, it really counted. I don't know what was going on in my head, but really it wasn't until I was in college, and I lived in an apartment, And all of my roommates were fellow believers at this time. And I had a roommate who went on a retreat, and one of the speakers talked about giving. And he brought back a videotape of this retreat, and he said, "You really need to watch. This is really good." So I watched it, and he went through a number of scriptural teachings about giving and so forth. I won't get into that. But at the end, the guy's name was Terry. He looked at all these college students and said, "Yeah, I know you guys you're poor, you're broke, you're in college, you don't really have an income." He says, "You need to make the decision to give now, because the decision you make now to give will establish a habit for your lifetime. And you got to decide, do you want to be a generous person or not? You can make that decision later. It's just tougher." And that really resonated with me. I just sat down and I thought, you're right. And that's the kind of person I want to become. So I made that decision. I mean, it's always difficult, but sometimes the first step the hardest. So that's what comes to mind for me.
So the series is called Give It Up for God. Today we're talking specifically about giving it up for the mission. What is mission and why is that important? So mission is what is the purpose, right? You hear organizations, it doesn't have to be a Christian organization, it can be you personally as an individual. Organizations out there, churches, all usually have a mission because everything they do gets filtered through that mission, right? Like if it doesn't coincide with our mission, we probably shouldn't be doing it. So today we're going to be talking about giving it up for the mission or the purpose of why are we generous here at Momentum? What's the purpose? Momentum's mission statement, Momentum moves people forward to love God, love people, and make disciples who make disciples. I love that you all said it with me. The first kind of chunk of that is being generous in how we love God. So, Jason and Dana, I'd love for you to answer this. How has first fruits giving, tithing, moved you guys forward spiritually to love God? Like, how does generosity, especially at the church level, move you forward to love God?
Okay, so Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about making a decision to to put your treasure in heaven rather than on earth. And the idea was you're making an investment, whether you believe it or not. You're investing your time, your money in something. And this thing, invest it in things that last forever, because the rest of it's going to go away. It won't last very long at all, and it certainly won't last beyond this lifetime. So for me, the idea of investing in something that's going to last, that whether I'm here or anywhere else where I've invested money and time or whatever for God, that it's working, it's doing something. Whether I see it or not, it will last forever. And I mean, to me, that's a motivator. That moves me forward to, hey, I want to. Here's an opportunity to do something that has lasting value.
For Cindy and I, when we create our budget, we have what's called a Love God line. And that line is actually at the top of our budget. So whenever we create our budget, basically that's the first thing that comes onto the list. And what that means is all the other things like rent, bills, clothing, food, whatever else, come after we first give back to God, giving those first fruits to God. And so if at the end of the list we're out of money, well, Nathan's going to live off of Costco samples for the rest of the week. So.
Oh yeah, I love that literal application of writing the words "love God" at the top of your budget. I remember back in the day when people wrote checks. Do you remember that? My mom was always the one who wrote it in our family, and I remember there would always be in the memo, she'd always put a cross. And it really had an effect on me, and now the love God. Like literally, instead of putting tithing or things I have to do, whatever, at the top, put the words love God. And then maybe second, Dan's also challenged us in the last couple weeks, love people. Like not only are we generous to God, maybe through our giving, but to put maybe a love people fund. So is there a story about a person, people here at Momentum who have inspired you to love people because of what you've seen in their generosity? Mike, Jason, do you guys want to answer that?
So I know one person in particular, not only with his finances, but also with his time, is Jeremy Speth and his family. I think of Jeremy, and I think of, if there's a big event here at Momentum, Jeremy's here, and he's
For
doing
sure,
something important for that event. And then I also think just the things that lead up to everything, whether it's, buying food for the men's camping trip, or, preparing the meals and getting ready and for the Amplify event. So it's just amazing how he uses not only his finances, but also his time. Another family that I think of is the Vire family, and I know them. I know their kids well from being in Mo Kids, and I love the kids, love hanging out with them. And their family is just such a great example of being generous with donating their van to take down the trips for Amplify, our middle school, high school ministry. Also, having their movie screen that we can use for movie nights, and then also they are generous in the sense where every year around Easter time, they throw a big party for their neighborhood with bounce houses, different things like that. And they do that just to really bless their neighbors, and it's really cool to see.
I remember when I first moved to Cleveland, I came to Momentum, and we went to a Mo group called Switchback, which met at the Smith House. And I remember...
Switchback's first roller coaster at Cedar Point. That's very important.
That's a picture of Switchback there, at least the guys there. We did crazy things, but it was interesting to me that that the Smiths would open up their house to strangers every week, and strange people like me. And I mean, the amount of destruction we did on their furniture. I mean, I remember burning a hole in their coffee table. I'm still sorry. No, but it was like they did it joyfully. And that really stuck with me, stuck with Cindy, and to the point that we want to do the same. And so today we actually host a Mo group at our house too, and it's off of their example.
Oh, thank you. Now they're an example to us. They've hosted Mo groups and interns, and they open their house to God all the time. So thank you for that. The last part of the mission maybe sometimes is the most confusing to people, but it's make disciples who make disciples. Disciples are just followers of Jesus. And so what does it mean to make disciples who make disciples, Mike?
Yeah, so that making disciples, it's really just helping someone along their journey as a follower of Jesus. And everybody's in different places. Everybody takes different steps. And that making disciples, it could be different for everyone. Maybe it's inviting someone to church or sitting with someone at church. Maybe it's just giving them opportunity to vent and ask questions. Maybe it's being someone who's, in Mo Kids or in Amplify, who's asking those kids or teens, those tough questions and going through that together. And then it's also seeing those people then do that with someone else. A great example here at Momentum is seeing people give, and because you give, we're able to do things like the Back to School Festival. And sometimes that's someone's very first step at Momentum of coming to something, doing something a little bit different, something outside of their comfort zone. It happens because you give. Through that opportunity, those people then become connected with someone. Hey, I saw you at the Back to School Festival. They start talking. They start seeing that person more. Maybe they go to that person's Mo group. They talk more. And then eventually that person who came that first time to Back to School Festival, they decide, well, yeah, this is something I want to do. I want to be a part of Momentum. I want to grow in my relationship with God. Maybe that leads to baptism for them, whatever it is. But then what's cool is that next year rolls around, and now you see that person volunteering at the Back to School Festival. You see that person doing different things for someone else. And it's just cyclical. It keeps going on in that making disciples who make disciples.
Matthew 28:19 says, Jesus said, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you." And then once we do that, right, make disciples who make disciples. And the truth is, we can sit up here and we know that generosity is important because someone taught us. Making disciples, you don't wake up one day and are a disciple, right? You become a disciple through studying the scriptures, but so much of it is caught. You're watching other people. People are pouring into you. You're in a small group, but you learn. All of us have definitely learned from other people, and that's really important. And then there are byproducts of sacrificial giving that God uses to accomplish his mission because we're giving it up for the mission. Like, in order to accomplish God's mission at Momentum, people have to be generous. Let me tell you some things, because I want you to know, where does your money go when you're generous at Momentum? And I started making this list last night, and it's a little bit long, but it's also really exciting. So, of course, we do things inside the building and outside the building on this property. Last Sunday afternoon, I was getting ready to leave. People were cleaning the building. Thank you to the cleaners. But people were cleaning the building, and all of a sudden, there were more people pulling into Momentum. And they had like djembes and violins and keyboards. What the heck is going on? Well, we opened the building and allow the Family Learning Center of Music to use our building for vocal and instrumental recitals. On Sunday nights, we host Amplify, our student ministry. And if you have teenagers, 6th through 12th grade, you are super grateful, are you not? That there are people who give so that we can open the building and have leaders who will lead that. Wednesday night, we have band practice here. I come into band practice Wednesday night. There's a men's Mo group meeting in the lobby. There's a mom's Mo group that meets here once a month on Friday morning. Friday night, I was driving from Macedonia to Twinsburg. I passed the building, and it's kind of late. And I look over, and there are all these cars, and I'm like, why are there all these cars at Momentum? And I remembered, oh, we host an AA group here on Friday night. Saturday morning, I'm actually driving from Twinsburg to Macedonia, and there's all kinds of vehicles. And I was reminded, Rejoice in Recovery Mo Group meets here on Saturday morning, but not just that, Rigs and Coffee, which is this national get-together of people with rigs who like coffee. I don't know. Adventurous people. I don't know. But they're super cool vehicles and campers lining out there. What's that called? The parking lot. The parking lot. The parking lot. Which is super cool because Jeremy Speth is the one who got this chapter started here, and he wasn't even here. He's in Alaska doing his rigs and coffee up there, I guess. I don't know. But he's doing that, and yet they all still came, and they come from all over Ohio, which is really cool. We've had weddings and funerals, baby showers, and grad parties, and that is not even getting into Easter extravaganza, Pigs with Santa, Back to School Fest, Twins Days Parade, Galentine's Brunch, and more things that we're going to use this property for. Because, you know, the truth is, just like you have to pay your bills at home, right? We have to pay the bills here. So, of course, when you're generous to Momentum, it's paying for staff to organize, to study, and to lead. It's paying for the bills for this building so we can open it up and ministry to happen. It gives hope to people. I mean, that's what it's all about. That when you're generous to Momentum and the building is open and we host all these events, it's not just to be the cool. It's not just to be, we have something to do, but it is to give hope to people who are hurting, hope to people who want a challenge, and hope to people that they will spend eternity with Jesus. It leads people to Jesus, and ultimately it fills up heaven. That is the mission of Momentum. So just to end this part, when you guys think of generosity, what would you tell people here that give? What happens? Like, what's the byproduct that you see when people are generous in a church?
For me, if someone wasn't generous, I wouldn't be here. Because what brought me to become a follower of Jesus is somebody invited me to go to a camp. And not only did they invite me, they knew that I would look for any excuse to get out of it. They paid for it. You know, they paid completely for it. And people were generous to do that, to donate to that. For me to go to a camp, the people who paid, they didn't know who I was. You know, and then going to that camp, that's that first time where I really encountered, like, yeah, this is something I want to be a part of. I do want to follow God. I want to learn more about Jesus. So to me, that really speaks to me of I needed someone to do that for me. And that's why I love the generosity that you all have, because now we get to do that for our kids, you know, for our teenagers to go to these camps where we get to send kids to camp at a much reduced rate because you're generous. And I love being a part of that.
Yeah, so again, it's not about the money, because God doesn't need your money. It's the things that we hold on to so tightly, those tend to become our idol. And a lot of times that's that money. And until we can actually let that go, we're not really able to fully worship. And so when we start becoming more generous, when we let go of that and say, God, I trust you more than this, then we become a church that's giving. We become a church that's worshiping through our giving. And I think that's an amazing thing.
So we went through a version of this earlier service today, and of course, as we're coming on the stage, we got the Reverend Stig. I really miss Reverend Stig, by the way. But I thought there's two reasons why that's funny. One, because Dan's Dan, right? It's just hysterical. But the other reason it's funny is because it plays on a stereotype that we have that, you know, in a church somewhere, whether it's a pastor like Reverend Stig or leadership team, that, hey, we're going to use Scripture to try and extract money from you for our benefit. And nobody wants that, right? None of us like to be treated that way. And, you know, maybe it's like that some places, but it's not like that here. So let me tell you the truth. As I mentioned earlier, my family was here from 2010 until 2017. So, you know, we worked here, we served here, we gave here, and now it's 2024. I've been back earlier, but every time I come back, I get to see friends like these folks sitting here on the stage and some of the audience, people that, you know, we used to serve with, and it's great to catch up. The other thing that's great is I see a lot of people I don't know, you know, and part of the reason that happened is because the folks back then made decisions to give and serve then, and now I can see disciples have made disciples. And today we have a decision to make. You know, are we going to invest our time and our efforts so that we can make disciples who will make disciples in the future? So, I mean, to me, that's the motivator behind it.
Thank you guys so much for sharing with us today. Will you guys give it up for them? It's really important for everybody to know that the people who lead Momentum are generous, godly people. They are people who give sacrificially, both in the past and, Dana, I'm sure at your new church now, down in Bowling Green, but also here at Momentum. So how cool that we get to be led by people who are doing what they are asking of us to do. So thank you for being here. Let's pray.